made legal years and years ago, but it's not about that. It's marijuana has been used as a tool of oppression and division. And you look at it for what it really is. There's a lot of injustice. It's not about the right to smoke or the right to grow, the right to distribute. Clearly, people are doing that in every single state in this country, and they're going to continue doing it regardless of federal prohibition. But this year, we have 3 states with legalization on the ballot, Oregon being one of them, Colorado and Washington are the others. And I think that we'll definitely see Colorado and Washington pass. Hope springs eternal, but I'm cautiously optimistic about Oregon's chances. We're not getting any support. We're getting bombarded with negative advertisements, and we've been fortunate to get a few endorsements through some campaigns and things like that. But there's no money trickling in, and people don't even realize that legalization is on the ballot. But I think it's important to talk about. Glad we're having this debate here today. I appreciate it, Mr. Yin, Mr. Wayne. And you guys take it away. It's all about you. Thanks for coming out today.
Well, it's a pleasure to be back at Wilson Park, and I appreciate James arranging such wonderful weather. Very nice to get there. Now, there's a lot of issues on the plate. If you look at the national campaign, when people are arguing about foreign policy, the Middle East, economics, and everything else, we're not really hearing much about this issue. There's kind of a bipartisan consensus in Washington that the drug should be illegal, that is marijuana. There's been some frustration, I think, among the president's supporters who thought that hope and change should include drug policy as well as other policy. What we see is basically a continuation of the policies of the Bush administration and previous administrations. This administration is no less vigorous in its prosecution of marijuana and other drug offenses as any previous administration. But I think that the substructure, the foundation of this policy is shifting. What we're seeing is a majority support in the polls now for legalization of marijuana. The first time, we're seeing these initiatives that are on the ballot. We're seeing an increase in the role of medical marijuana. I think that at some point, these political changes are going to have an impact on national policy, as they should. I mean, we're talking about a debate today, but my sense is that we're not going to have too much disagreement about the substance of the issue. If we're looking at marijuana in particular, but also drugs, the question is, why should we have illegality? I think the starting point here should be, why should we criminalize, not why should we legalize? I mean, in what we call a free society, most of the things we do, we presume we have a right to do. We're normally not talking about locking people up for using alcohol or smoking cigarettes, whatever limitations we might put on them. The question is, why should we do that for these substances? I mean, drugs really are not unique. There's a whole range of mind-altering substances out there. Is there a reason to treat these very differently? That is, to create a criminal regime. Because what we're talking about is locking people up. It's not just civil restrictions. It's not just saying don't smoke on campus. We're talking about throwing people in jail. And that impact, obviously, is quite extraordinary in somebody's career. And there are a lot of other activities which offer trade-offs that sometimes are difficult. There are a lot of things I suspect we can look at other people and say you shouldn't do that. We can think of whether it be extreme sports or a lot of other things. People take risks. People make choices. People make trade-offs. The same thing in terms of use of drugs. Marijuana, I think, is the most obvious place to have a serious debate about this because it's the most widely used drug. It's obviously widely liked by a lot of different people. A lot of different impacts on it. But the question ultimately is, should somebody go to jail because they want to use marijuana? The question is, what are the arguments then for prohibition? Well, it's an obvious argument for prohibition on any substances you're going to hurt other people. I mean, that's really what the criminal law is all about. I'd argue there's a very different sense of morality if it's interpersonal morality, that is, it affects other people, as opposed to intrapersonal morality, that's soul. So the obvious criminal law cases, murder, theft, other sort of assault, you're attacking somebody else. Pretty hard to make that case for marijuana. I mean, it's hard to make that case for a lot of other substances as well. I mean, heroin, people tend not to be violent after they use heroin. Alcohol is probably the most criminogenic drug out there, perhaps, not only in terms of people who commit crimes, but victims of crimes. the street, most of the stuff is going to be taking place. We should be respectful of that. And I think there are a lot of different options out there. But the critical thing is if you want to take profit out of the drug war, you want to take profit out of the drug market, you've got to legalize it, criminalize it in some fashion. If you want to restore civil liberties, if you want to end throwing people in jail for doing things that many other people are doing, like comparable things, alcohol, tobacco, all of these require we eliminate the criminal law front. I think drug use very often is a medical, it's a health, it's a moral problem, but you solve those by dealing with those particular problems. You don't solve them by turning to the criminal law. We've had 40 years of a fairly extensive drug war. I would argue the result is very negative. Let's learn from that 40 years and change policy. I think Oregon, Washington, and other states this year have a good opportunity to start that process. Thank you.
Okay, well, let's see, this is, I guess, supposed to be debate. I agree largely on part one. I've signed a consent form for this to be recorded, so I think I've torpedoed any chance that I might have for a judgeship or whatever. But that's okay. I'd rather be teaching you than deciding boring cases. But maybe wait till you become a lawyer, then maybe for example. But let me just start by emphasizing a few points about how big of a cost drug war takes, and then I'm really going to spend my time discussing more of part two, the implementation issues, and what I would see as the principles that should guide us toward thinking about how to decriminalize. But first of all, just to give you a sense of how big the toll drug war is taking. In federal criminal law, I had my students at the beginning look at distribution of cases of conviction. That is to say, you look at all federal prisoners who've been convicted, and you do a little pie chart to see what crimes they're convicted of. Drug cases accounted for about 30% of the Bush administration in 2007. So in 2007, federal prisoners were convicted that year about 30% of the drug cases. Anybody have a guess as to what the second most common crime or area of conviction in federal courts was? Yes.
Guns.
No, guns are very, well, not very low. They make the pie chart, but not guns. Fraud, even less than guns.
Taxes?
Even less. Immigration cases were number 2, and in the Bush administration, they accounted for about 28% of the documents for that year. We're talking about convictions. Now, then I have to look at 2011. President Obama, well into his first term, so it's not any sort of holdover policies. Anybody have a guess as to what the number 1 crime of conviction under the Obama administration 2011 was? No. Immigration and drugs flip-flopped. So immigration moved up to number 1 to about 32%, and drugs dropped to number 2, but still a very staggeringly high percentage of cases. So basically, it doesn't really, as Mr. Mando suggested, it doesn't really seem to matter who is in office. Now, I think if Gary Johnson got elected, it probably maybe that would matter, but we don't really see much of a change, and there are a lot of structural factors I think that lead into this, a lot of inertia, a lot of career prosecutors who might really are setting a lot of policy. The other staggering fact is, okay, so I'm just telling you how many people were convicted or the percentages of conviction, but if you look at prison time sentence, and I would recommend higher sentences. But even then, you're looking at guys getting 10 years, 20 years for the drug cases, and then white-collar defendants who would build banks out of literally $1 million or more getting 44 months. And the judge said, that's a hard time. Like, well, that would be a hard time. What about 20 years that you gave the other drug person? So just if you think about that in terms of prison costs, this is not just a federal issue,
race, you see that they say that, as much as the judges don't agree with the policy choice, or, it's their job to just talk about the law, so that's what they do, and they read it as it stands. What resort to the political process is there really when you have this DEA, this kind of shadowy fourth branch of government institution at the federal level that's able to pressure state governors into refusing to sign, medical marijuana laws passed by the people, and threatening them with with all sorts of criminal prosecution, things like that, which kind of violates the 10th Amendment anti-commandeering doctrine, and it doesn't let people know where the, opposition is coming from. Like, in terms of the political process, you have people that vote for Obama, who says he's going to respect state medical marijuana laws, and then goes and does the same thing. Do you think that there's a reasonable argument to be made that, it's just facially, the CSA is unconstitutional, it's ultra-virus, it's a violation of vertical separation of powers, or like the non-delegation doctrine? I think that the DEA, personally, I think it is.
I mean, the problem is not the DEA, the problem is the president. The president chooses it, he chooses the Attorney General. And if Gary Johnson was president, we wouldn't be worrying about the DEA. The head of the DEA would be somebody who would be Gary Johnson wanted him to be.
It's kind of 40% of the government, so I don't think there would be.
But in particular, given his position on this issue, you can be quite sure that President Gary Johnson would make sure that if there was a DEA or whoever the Attorney General was, this would be an issue. I mean, I think the race case, I think, still is opinion, but nothing else was looking for drug opinion, not a commerce law opinion. There's a lot of folks who think you read that, you have to read that opinion in the context of what the issue was. That had an impact on how the judges wrote it. I mean, there was a lot of kind of leading up to NFIB. Some people thought that Scalia might vote to uphold the Affordable Care Act because of race. And I think that no, that basically his opinion on commerce laws and those agreement powers was such that he would not agree to NFIB, but race was a drug case in his mind. And I think that really did affect the judgment. I think NFIB was wrong. I mean, I would have decided race differently, but the court has made its ruling, so I think it's facially unconstitutional.
No, I think this is more of a political science question than a law question. It's why. I mean, the easy answer to what you posed is, well, Obama promised to do this if you're a English voter. Don't vote for it. Of course, we know your choice realistically is Obama or Romney, and maybe that Obama is the lesser of the two evils. The real problem is why is it no viable third party? That's really a political science question. Although, I would say, look, you're voting in Oregon, right? Oregon, Obama's going to get Oregon's electoral votes no matter how you vote. So why not vote in conscience? Any other questions? Alex?
I was curious to hear what your response to this idea of tax or however funded support for social programs for people who voluntarily choose to sign.
Well, I do think that if you exercise the liberty to use drugs, you should bear responsibility for using them. So as with alcohol, if you commit a crime, you don't excuse it. The issue of mens rea is very complicated before intent. But certainly if you use drugs and you commit a lot of acts, you should be accountable, so you shouldn't sweep it away. I mean, one of the ironies is that cigarette smoking probably helps healthcare costs because it kills you. I mean, the reality is people die sooner. I mean, the irony is they've done studies on this. Cigarette smoking actually probably lowers health costs. I wouldn't advocate for that reason. But some of these issues actually get kind of complicated. One of the reasons not to kind of nationally socialize healthcare costs is because that almost inevitably needs to be subsidized. Because then you're forced to decide when you let you do something. You ride a motorcycle without a helmet. I mean, it's one of these problems. You ride a motorcycle without a helmet, you get in an accident, you're uninsured, you pay. And I think he's right. We're not going to say, tough, too bad, that's where it goes. You're not going to be fair. On the other hand, I don't like a system where we start going out there and trying to put restrictions on people. You can't smoke, you can't like, you can't drink, you can't. So, it probably makes sense to have some program. I can say that you can afford it, certainly should pay for it yourself. The reality, I suspect, is you're going to have some social programs out there. They should be tailored. We should try not to create essentially a subsidy system where if you choose to engage in behavior that can be self-destructive, we don't want to encourage that. We want you to bear the primary cost.
Anyone else have any questions? Go ahead.
For the professor, the opponents of decriminalizing
this is a question for both the panelists. Have you guys read the Obamacare, Sibelius, the Federation of Small Independent Businesses? Where do you read the tea leaves, and how do you see the future of federalism as laid out in that opinion, especially the South Dakota v. Dole test being met for the first time, this kind of anti-coercion principle with the attachment of the funds? How do you see that playing out in terms of federal-state relations, and maybe especially in terms of the drug war, with so much of state, law enforcement being funded by the federal government?
Well, it's such a complex case in certain ways, especially the dynamic within the court and how it's going to be